college.
I'm Debbie Berkeley, and I'm a disability services counselor at University of Virginia.
So we're going to talk specifically about disability services at all colleges, and then we'll speak specifically, well, I should say, overall, we'll speak about disability services in college, and each of us will talk specifically about the differences between our schools. Okay? All right, so disability support services is available on all college campuses, and assistance is available for students with documented disabilities.
And I'm going to jump in really quick and just say that it's a service that is provided under the ADA, so there's no cost associated with that. I get asked a lot, what is the fee for this, and is there going to be a cost for this? And this is something that is provided to all students who have a documented disability, and colleges are not supposed to charge any extra fee for this service.
Yeah. So what does the student want to do? First of all, you want to make the initial contact with the disability service office on whichever campus you go to. That's the first thing you want to do. Provide documentation of your disability and be prepared to discuss your disability and request the accommodations needed. So it's really important that the student advocate for themselves. Self-determination, I'm sure you've all heard that. Attendance at IEP meetings. I think it's awesome that you're here tonight, getting information for yourself from schools and what they require. So important skills for students to have is to be self-aware. Know your own strengths and limitations. Debbie and I were talking about this earlier. Many students can't take a full course load. So why put yourself through that? Especially at the community college, you can take a reduced course load. You can take, 3 years instead of 2 years. I know students are trying to get through it quicker, but oftentimes the more credits you take, the more stress you put on yourself.
That's also true at a four-year college. You can take a reduced course load. That's an accommodation where you can be considered a full-time student and you won't be on academic probation, or it won't be, negatively reflected on your transcript or anything like that. And you can take a reduced course load at a four-year college as well.
Self-advocacy, as I said earlier, it's really important that the student is comfortable with who they are and asking for help. Because pretty much when they're in school, middle school, high school, everybody knows what they need and they put that in place. When they come to college, they actually have to ask for the accommodation. So there are many students on college campuses that maybe need the services, but they've never sought it out, or they seek it out too late. Sometimes I meet with students and they're in there with their parents. Oftentimes it's a mom, and I call them the dog in the window. And what we do is we actually write letters, and we give the letters to the student, and the student goes and meets with their professors. So, a lot of times these dogs in the window, they'll nod in agreement, and they won't come and see me, and they don't have to. But sometimes they'll come right at finals, and they'll say, this isn't working. And I'll say, what's not working? I'm not passing my classes. Well, are the accommodations not working? That's the first thing I ask, and they'll say, well, I never met with my instructor. They'll go in their backpacks, and the letters are all squished in there from months of sitting in there. And at that time, it may be too late. Because professor may say, well, we'll give you accommodations on the final, but even if you ace the final, you're still going to fail the course. And you don't want to put yourself in that situation. So when you are comfortable asking for help, what are the benefits? Self-confidence and empowerment. And what I tell students is college is very different than high school. In high school, everybody's worried about everyone else. What are they thinking about me? In college, pretty much they're thinking about themselves and what they need to do well. Because even if you come to PVCC, many of our students are going to transfer to four-year schools, and they want to do well. And we have so many resources, and I tell students, get tutoring. Some of them will say, oh, come on, Ms. Hannaford, I'm too cool for that. And I'll say, well, are you too cool to get an F on your transcript? And I go down to the tutoring center, and who do I see in there? Students in organic chemistry, students in physics, students who want to go on to UVA, they want to go on to tech. They don't care what students think. And even some students will come to my office and they'll say, gosh, I saw a student down in the tutoring center getting tutoring for math, and he was like an AP student in high school. And I'll say, yeah, he's smart. He's getting the resources that he needs at no cost, which is really nice. So another important skill for students is knowledge of your learning style. There's a lot of reading and writing in college, and a lot of times students come from high school without those skills. So what I teach students is, what is your learning style? So if you have difficulties reading, but you're an auditory learner, guess what? Get your books in audio format. I can help you with that. Many students could have used those services in high school and they didn't. So I tell students now, start listening to books in audio format that you might enjoy, put it in your car, because that's going to be a way that might help you get through textbooks more seamlessly. Awareness of your disability and its effect on learning and your work, that's important. So if you have strengths in some areas, that's what we want to play on. We want to look at, okay, let's get you, if you're not really good at taking notes, let's get you a note taker, but that note taker is going to email you his or her notes, and you're going to compare it with your notes so that you can learn what good notes look like. And you're not just going to sit there, you're also going to take your notes. Awareness of personal preferences and interests, and knowledge of post-secondary options. These are important. So is college the end-all, be-all? No. I mean, not everyone has to come to college. There are certainly other training programs out there for you. And Piedmont has a lot of really good programs. We have a culinary arts program for students who want to be chefs. We have lots of other ones that don't require transfer, radiography, sonography. All of these major healthcare jobs in the field are in demand right now.
One of the accommodations that I talk to a lot of my students about is priority registration, which is an opportunity to register earlier than they normally would for their classes, so that they can set up a schedule that works for them. And that, just sort of building on awareness of personal preferences and strengths and learning styles. There may be students, due to their disabilities, who may need to avoid early morning classes, or who may need to keep a routine, who may need to avoid having back-to-back-to-back classes. And so that priority registration gives them the opportunity to set up a schedule that really builds on their strengths and allows them to set up a college schedule that works really well for making sure that they don't have to sit in classes, 4 classes back-to-back. Or they don't have to be in class right at 8 o'clock in the morning, every morning. Allows them to make sure that they do have a good routine that really meets their needs. Make sure that they get a good night's sleep every night, and, really kind of takes some of their disabilities into account.
That's an excellent point, and we have that as well. So students get to make their own schedule, which is really nice. And so what I tell students is, if you're not a morning person, don't come in at 8 o'clock in the morning. We have classes that begin at 8 and classes that end at 10 p.m. Now, the evening classes are 3 hours long, and I typically don't recommend those classes to students. Now, I will meet students and they'll say, but I love to stay up all night. I play my video games, I'm going to sleep in, I'm going to get up at 4 o'clock, and then I'm going to take all my classes from 7 to 10 in the evening. And I'll say, not a good idea, because you'll have to sustain your attention for 3 hours in a lecture. They give you a 15-minute break at 8:30. Whoopee. That's a long time. And who do you think are in those classes? People who are working during the day and coming in the evening. Yep. So how is college different from high school? Less structure. So pretty much students are here, you're here about 30 hours a week, right? Monday through Friday. Some students in college only come 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can take Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes. 12 credit hours is the minimum for full-time at PVCC. What is it at
It's the same.
UVA as well?
Yeah, it's the same.
And what that means is you are in class only 12 hours a week. That's it. But here's a rule of thumb. For every hour that you are in class, so let's say you're taking 12 credits, you have to put in double time for studying. So reading, writing, preparing to come back to class. So that's why we call it full-time, because a lot of times students will say, well, I'm only here Tuesdays and Thursdays. I've got 3 or 4 classes. This is a breeze. I'm gonna go out and get a full-time job. And I'll say, please don't do that, because in order to be successful, you have to put the time in. So getting used to doing homework is important. So 24 hours a week just on study time. The classroom time is basically to get information, to go outside of the class to do the work.
So if you're taking 12 credit hours, you should plan on 24 hours of,
Just study time. So that's 36 hours a week of class time and study
Okay.
time. That's why we call it full-time. Some students take longer. I tell students, you know, it may take you longer than 24 hours a week, depending on how much work you have or, you know, the classes that you're taking. More reading and writing, increased, more intensive workload. There's less personal attention. There's no special ed in college. Instructors are not going to chase students. Some have attendance policies, some don't. If you show up to class, fine. You don't show up, just make sure you hand in your papers and take your tests, and that's pretty much it. A student has to make appointments with their professors. They all have office hours, and I recommend that students go and meet with them if they're struggling. I actually tell students, if you don't get 100% on a test, meet with your instructor. Find out why, what you can do to get a better grade. I don't care if you get a 98. If you don't know why you missed that last question, ask. And then, of course, there are no IEPs in college. So the student meets with a disability services person, provides the documentation, and then we write letters to the instructors just giving approval of the accommodations, and then the student goes and meets with the professors. And that takes, you know, a lot of self-advocacy. Sometimes I role play in my office. I tell the student to leave my office if they're feeling anxious, and then come in, knock on my door and come in and act like I was the professor. What are you gonna say? Let's practice it, because once you practice it, you feel more comfortable with it. And a lot of times students will come and they say, wow, that was easier than I thought. They were really open. You know, professors are not gonna look at it and say, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. That's not the case. And in every syllabus, I don't know if this is like this at UVA, but we're mandated to have a paragraph in every syllabi stating that if you are a student with a disability who requires accommodations, please meet with, and all of my information is on there, and provide me with the documentation early in the semester. Okay? All right, students are encouraged to contact DSS prior to or upon admission. That's important. Go and meet with those people, get a feel for how their office works, as well as what kind of accommodations you might be able to get, what kind of technology is on campus. I tell students now, if you have difficulties writing, you know, there's an awesome app now for your phone. It's Dragon Naturally Speaking. It's no cost. Start talking out your papers. If you're, you know, just practice that and see if that helps. To be eligible, students must provide current and comprehensive documentation of a disability and the need for academic accommodations. So at PVCC, if a student is retested as a freshman, then we're okay. Now UVA has a little bit different standards.
Yeah, so a lot of the four-year colleges like documentation to be about 3 years old at most. If you are entering college and your documentation, your testing is older than 3 years, colleges will generally award provisional accommodations, to give the student time to get the testing updated. UVA actually does do some testing actually right there, within the Disability Services Office. Not all colleges have that service available, but some colleges do.
And is there a cost for that, Debbie?
Not at UVA, but, at some, if you go out into the community, obviously, it's gonna cost. And, we also provide resources for, community resources where, you can get testing on like a sliding scale. And so some colleges may also have some of those resources available as well.
And so we've told you what is considered proper and complete. So a lot of schools are doing reviews, and I'll look at those reviews, but what doesn't transfer to college is a summary of performance. That's not gonna cut it. We have to have a diagnosis and how it impacts the student's learning and what accommodations they've had and what's been helpful. That's important. All right, so students must disclose their disability. I get a lot of calls from parents, and what I say is, Mom, I'm glad you called, but I need to hear from your daughter, or I need to hear from your son. Okay, I can't do anything without having that student request. It doesn't matter if you do, if you jump up and down, if you bring the documentation in, unless I get to actually meet with the student and he or she requests the accommodations, then it's not going to work. Colleges and universities are not accountable for providing accommodations to students who have made no request for them. So, and I do get a lot of calls from parents that say, they had an IEP in high school, they need this. And I'll say, I understand, but they also need to come to my office.
This is, and I'm gonna sort of jump in here, at four-year colleges, students may also make requests for housing accommodations as well. And the Disability Services Office is a good place to call and start that conversation. And this also goes double. We cannot, colleges and universities cannot make housing accommodations on behalf of students. The students have to make the accommodation request themselves. And we get lots of parents calling and saying, we would like, A, B, and C on behalf of our student. And the student, as an adult that's going to be the one that's living in that space, really has to be the one that makes that request, that says, this is what I really think would be best for me, this is what I would like to request in terms of my housing accommodation, so that in terms of academic and in terms of housing accommodations, students have got to be the ones to make those requests directly, and we're just not able at the college level to to accommodate requests unless the student makes it directly. And we've actually had, I've had many situations where, a student has, a parent has made a request and the student has said, well, I don't want that. I don't want to live, I don't want to live in that configuration, and we have to go with the student. That's the legal requirement, so.
Yeah, I work in the summer session office at UVA, and we get a lot of parents calling in, asking about this, that, the other for their student. I'm like, same thing. I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. You have to have your student call. And they hate it. Oh, I pay the bill. Well, I'm sorry. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
There's some things you can, but some
frustrating,
things you
yeah.
can't.
And we have releases of information, but even then, if a parent calls and they say, well, I have a release, and I'll say, that's fine, and I understand your concerns, but we're gonna have a meeting with your son or daughter. I don't feel comfortable talking on the phone, just the two of us. They need to be part of that conversation. Because again, we're trying to get them into adulthood and
Right.
part of the conversation. All right, so some of the frequently asked questions, and then we'll open it up for your questions. Will students receive the same services as in high school? Not necessarily. They may actually receive more. Just as I said, some students could benefit from audiobooks. They've never had that. We have technology on campus now, Dragon Naturally Speaking. We have a Kurzweil reader that can read, scan and read and save files, and you can go back and re-listen to things. Blind students typically use JAWS. I just love the names of these software programs. So JAWS is a voice-to-text activated software. Yeah, so sometimes they can actually get more. Who is an individual with a disability? So as we said, it has to be diagnosed, and it has to impact a daily life activity. So learning, walking, seeing, hearing, those kinds of things. What are the responsibilities of the student with a disability? We just talked about that. They have to be sure that they request the accommodation from the Disability Services Office and from all of the professors in the classes where they need the accommodations. Now, there are some students that may have a math disability, but they don't have a reading disability or writing. So in English and history and social science, they're fine, but maybe in math and science, they need those accommodations. And that's important to know as well. How does the DSS office determine and communicate a student's accommodations to faculty? We do not. The student does. Now, sometimes a faculty member may call, especially at PVCC. I mean, we're a bit small, and faculty are, they're there to teach, so they'll call and they say, I'm really concerned about the student who brought me a letter. They've disappeared from the class. Have you seen them? Or he or she's really struggling. I don't know how else I may be able to help them. So sometimes that happens as well. All right, so how do you prepare for college while you're still in high school? Do you mind if I ask you, so what grade you're in?
Senior.
You're a senior? Awesome, great. So how do you prepare? So the first thing I would tell you is make sure you participate in your IEP and your post-secondary goals. So there's a transition plan in your IEP, and you should be talking about what it is that you want to do. If you're interested in healthcare, so whether you want to go into nursing or you want to be a doctor, be sure to take biology, chemistry, and math in high school, especially high-level math. Believe it or not, nurses need a lot of math. I meet with a lot of pre-nursing students, and they say, well, why do I need to have math? I say, well, because of drug calculations, drug dosages. If you have, milligrams and you need to convert those to milliliters, you better know how to do that because you have somebody's life in your hands. Engineering and computer science programs require proficiency in high-level math. Again, a lot of students want to work on work in computer science, and I'll say, well, what interests you? Well, I like messing around with computers. Well, you need to have a lot of math because programming is a lot of math. So calculus and trigonometry. And taking those in high school will help you. All right, so explore colleges. Go and visit, meet with people on the campus. Find out what the major is. Sometimes I'll meet with students because many students, as I said, from PVCC will transfer to different schools, and many of them do transfer to UVA. And I'll say, well, what is it that you want to major in at UVA? And they'll say, oh, marine biology. Well, last time I looked, UVA is not anywhere near water. And in order to be a marine biologist, you have to be near water. So you might want to go to UVA, but they don't have the major that you want. So you might want to look at Old Dominion or another school that's by the water that has marine biology. Complete a career assessment or a vocational evaluation, especially if you're undecided. I'm going to tell you about my story. I went to school in the 70s, and I thought I wanted to be a teacher for two reasons. One, I liked working with kids, and two, I wanted summers off.
Yeah, I love that.
It is, yeah. So I did fine my first 2 years, and what I tell students is if you want to go to a four-year school, even if you come to PVCC, your first 2 years are all of your general ed classes. So I did fine my first 2 years, took all my general eds, and then junior year is when you get into what I call the meat of your degree. So I started doing my student teaching as a junior. I'm from Rhode Island, that's where the accent's from. And I went to student teach in a 4th grade class in an inner city. I was outside of Providence. So in Providence, Rhode Island, 4th grade class, in the winter, it was in the spring. I thought I was gonna die. It was like corralling cats. They had to put snow, suits on to go outside, snow everywhere, kids throwing snowballs in the class. I thought, this is not for me. And I did fine, like I said, the lesson plans were great. But luckily for me, I was volunteering at a group home on campus. It was right outside of campus, so I could walk there. It was part of a sociology class that I was taking, and I really enjoyed it. I was still working with kids. I was tutoring them. I was taking them on recreational activities, and I thought, this is a better fit for me. You never think what a work environment's going to be like until you actually do it. I felt cooped up in the classroom for 6 hours. I thought, no, this is not for me. I need some variety. So I ended up changing my major. I was going into my senior year. I had to tell my parents, I'll be in school a little while longer. And my parents were very supportive, and this is what they told me, and I passed this along to students. We are on our jobs longer than we are at home. And if we're not happy on our jobs, then we're not going to be happy in life. So it's important that you enjoy what you do, that you fit into that environment. So, I had to foot the bill for my last semester, but, it was really good. I made a change. I talked to the people in the group home and asked them what majors they had. Some had psychology majors, some did counseling, some did social work. And I looked at all of the programs at the school that I went to, and I chose to do social work. So that's what my BSW, I have a BSW. So, that's a long story to say, go and explore careers. Yeah, I'm sure there was a career center on my campus, but I never sought it out. Take the SAT or ACT. If you're going to a 4-year school, even with guaranteed admission, they require that. They don't care how you did on it. As long as you have an associate's degree at PVCC, even UVA, you can get a low score on the SAT. They'll still take you as long as you have the GPA for UVA. If planning to attend a community college, you may need to take a placement assessment. So we do take the ACT and the SAT scores, but if they're not at the cutoff, because PVCC has cutoffs as well. So the cutoff for the SAT at Piedmont is you need a 500 in English and a 520 in math. If you have below that, then you'll have to take the placement test. And that's to assess where you are with your reading, writing, and math skills. The placement test is untimed for all students. They can use a calculator for the math. Okay? All right, so continue to develop your self-advocacy skills, visit college campuses, and obtain copies of your IEP, educational evaluations, and/or medical records, depending on the disability. So the IEP is not going to transfer to college, but sometimes it's helpful for me to look at what accommodations you've had. The most important thing are those evaluations. So what drove the IEP? The IEP just didn't appear out of thin air. It was based on evaluations that the student had, educational, psychological evaluations. And those are really important to look at. Okay. And then there are some community agencies that also help. For example, the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehab Services, they do career assessments and they do work with people with disabilities. Many of them work in the high schools. So there is actually a DRS, now it's called DARS, worker that comes to all of the high schools. So if you haven't already made a connection with them, please do so. If the student is deaf or hard of hearing, the Department of Deaf and Hard of Hearing is very good. They're based in Stanton, but they have this area as part of their caseload, and then the Department for the Blind and Vision Impaired as well can be helpful. All right, and then just, if any of you would like this PowerPoint, I can certainly email it to you. I didn't bring any copies with me today. Any questions, concerns?
I have a question
Yes.
about, like the testing,